Great, thanks for that introduction. And hello, everyone. And to the panelists, thank you so much for joining the panel this morning or this afternoon, Japan time. I think set the stage and really gave great context for this discussion. The COVID-19 pandemic has been independent India's first disaster, if you may, that witnessed the private sector matching the Indian government every step of the way, and also confirmed that Indian startups, like Atit said, in spite of all the challenges we've had this year, it's affirmation that the startup ecosystem will continue to be key in driving India's economic growth. For example, again, some of the data we saw, in spite of the pandemic, Indian startup ecosystem added between 9 and 10 unicorns in 2020, more than even China. COVID, of course, posed a major challenge for Indian startups. Early stage venture capital investment fell from 2.4 billion in 2019 to about 1.6 billion in 2020 so far in this year. But the impact was mixed across sectors, and most startups in India seem to have recovered to pre-COVID levels. Of course, there are some segments that are still struggling and need some intervention to come back to pre-COVID levels, but we've seen significant growth in some segments, especially with a shift to online and acceleration to digital e-commerce. And as you know, large companies look to startups for a variety of reasons, including access to new IP, acquiring new channels for growth, and partnership to learn and accelerate internal innovation. As we enter 2021, our belief is, of course, that it is super important for every enterprise and corporate leader to understand the dynamics of different startup ecosystems around the world, especially in terms of opportunities, threats, and their outlook. We have an eminent set of panelists today, both from the enterprise, from the ecosystem, and as active investors, to help us understand why large global multinational companies and organizations are increasingly looking to India and not just focus on San Francisco, London, Berlin, or Tel Aviv. So with that context, let me now turn to the panelists and start by asking three broad top-of-mind questions. So first, would love to hear what is your organization's interest in startups? Second, why India? And third, very specifically, what is your interest in the Indian startup ecosystem? Maybe I can start with Ashok. Do you want to take this first, and then Suzuki-san, Manish, and Kawamoto-san?
Sure. Thanks, Amaresh, and glad to be part of this panel. Hope we can add a lot of value to the Japanese customers. To start with, if you know, Intel was one of the earliest startups. It started in a garage long back. Now it no longer can be called a startup, but that's the genesis of a startup once they become unicorns. So I would say that Intel is based on innovation, so it thrives on innovation. Which has been some of the best in Intel. We look for cutting edge technologies, which are used by all of you in terms of building solutions for the marketplace.
Suzuki-san, do you want to take this, and then we'll come back to Ashok when he rejoins us?
Okay. Thank you very much for introduction. And yeah, it's about JETRO. It's been these 5 years since JETRO started to be engaged in startup-related activities. And we used to focus mainly on Japanese export promotion, and mostly Japanese manufacturers setting up their factories in Asian countries. But recently, global business models drastically changed, and we should push Japanese business more to catch up the situation. And now we diversified our support towards creation of a new business model. And of course, that's in line with the innovative type of the business with more digital technologies. And of course, the startups are the core players. So we deal with both Japanese startups and foreign startups to be match made. with each other and also with other business or institutional players in every sector and field. And my office in Bangalore started this initiative 2 years ago. And we have the name India-Japan Startup Hub. We've been supporting more than 100 Japanese companies up to now. And as Atish-san already mentioned, since the beginning, Zinnov is our knowledge partner. And why India? I must say India is not our only destination as JETRO itself. We are engaged in this initiative with 28 cities in 17 countries. Even our office in Tel Aviv or Dubai or Nairobi are a part of it. But I would like to emphasize the importance and more potentiality and complementarity of India towards Japanese business. India is one of the biggest startup ecosystem with one of the biggest domestic markets in the world. Huge number of related players in India. Lots of activities are happening here. India is already mature structure of its ecosystem, and it is also having the human resources. Human resources, and if any Japanese company is dealing with digital related business anywhere in the world, they must eventually meet with Indian players. So I think Japanese companies should take a shortcut to come to India directly. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Manish, as heading some of the key innovation efforts of Panasonic, what are your views?
Yes, well, thanks, Amaresh, for the opportunity, and glad to be part of this panel discussion. So, as you know, that Panasonic is a 102 years old company. It was started by Mr. Kawamoto Suzuki, and he started in a small home as an electric bulb company, and then it has grown to the level where we are today. So we are a diversified technology company today, and we offer solutions for the better life for individuals, and for better world for enterprises and communities. So in that context, India Innovations was set up about 3 years back, and our charter was to kind of launch quick solutions in a speedy way with agility. And we started looking at all the cutting edge technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT. So our interest in the startup ecosystem from an India perspective has been to kind of technology partner. And we look for startups in the space of IoT, artificial intelligence, machine learning, industrial IoT as well. So what we do is, since we are launching and our solutions in a very speedy manner, from an Indian context, these startups kind of fill some of those gaps very quickly for us. And also, it's a two-way road. Basically, while we provide a broader outreach for these startups, we leverage their technologies or their solutions to make a comprehensive solution from our side, or extension of our solutions, whether it is connected home solutions that we have launched, whether it is our Industry 4.0 solutions, the smart factory solutions in the digital IoT space that we have launched. So that's how we interact. And we also mentor them in terms of how to scale up. Because what we have seen is in Indian startup, while we have 35 unicorns today, and maybe roughly about 52 unicorns, which have a potential to become unicorns by 2022. Still, there is a lot of I would say startups which are mid-level or lower level, which are like maybe $1 million evaluation. And these kind of startups, they struggle at certain point in time in order to reach that scale, or in order to attract investors for the funding. And those are the areas where big organizations like us or Intel or other big organizations, where it helps them in terms of outreach. So that's where our interests are. And also another thing is, Indian startup ecosystem is quite young entrepreneurs, and their ability to take risk is very high. And that's what excites us in Panasonic at India Innovation Center, because we also look forward to launching solutions in a very agile way, very speedy way. So that's how we kind of work with the Indian ecosystem.
Great. Thank you so much, Manish. Kawamoto-san, as an active investor in startups and now looking to kind of engage with the Indian ecosystem, would love to hear your views.
Okay, so thanks for connecting and thank you for having me today. So brief introduction about myself and the Global Brain is a Global Brain is basically global investors. We have a couple branches, 5 branches, such as UK and the US and Singapore and Indonesia. And so which is why we are, from the day one we are investing in the overseas, but we also extremely interested in the Indian market a couple of years back. Then we are waiting for the right timing for diving into this market. And what we have realized is, due to the, relationship between China and India, so China investor will put off their hand from the India. This is a first, the important phenomenon for us. And secondly, as you know, the Geo is trying to create an ecosystem platform, and which is why government is investing the bunch of the money to the India. So these tendencies is stimulators to interested in diving into the Indian market furthermore. And specifically, from my point of view, that I have realized for the Indian market is, simply speaking, India is a large potential market in terms of population bonus. I think that 1.4 billion, that perhaps is exceeding 1.4 billion, and perhaps it overtakes China in 2025 or something. And one more thing is the middle of the age, average age is very young, that's 25, although Japan is at 45. So, and internet user is also, 450 million, I guess, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So the number of those internet users is increasing, right? In such a case, throughout the, what's called proceeding of the adult system as well, the bunch of the people with access to the internet market. In such a case, tech-driven startups might definitely arise, for sure. And one more thing, the ecosystem is very, taking a great balance in India. Government is supporting too much startup in India. They are trying to set up, incubation system, not only, city, but also university as well. And secondly, investors are circulating, such as, Sachin Bansal-san and, Ritesh as well, Ritesh Agarwal from the oil. Those kind of investors are circulating in Ratan-san and Nandan-san. Those kind of big founder, Tata and Infosys and top startup company, they're coming back to the ecosystem. This circulation is very nice, we have realized. And one more thing is, the number of the engineers. They are trying to come back from the US and the UK. So they try to create a big startup company. These 3 points is we are, these three elements matching is we are really, expecting.
That's very interesting. So you kind of mentioned quite a few elements. There's large market size, large talent pool, the demographics with a young age and average age, internet connectivity, and then also the successful founders coming back to help and grow other enterprises. So with that context, next question, maybe, I don't know if Ashok's back, maybe I'll start with him, if he's back online. All of you have active engagement in other ecosystems as well, right? Like Kawamoto-san mentioned UK, US, Singapore, Indonesia. So you also have investments, engagement in Germany, Japan, China, Israel. So the question is, should India be seen as an alternative to the Valley, Beijing or Tel Aviv, or is that the right perspective? Or should Indian startup ecosystem be seen through a different lens? Are there some elements in India that are really unique and different? Or is it just seen as should you see India just as an alternative to the Valley? How is India different for you? Maybe Suzuki, maybe Ashok, if you are back, you can start. We can start with you, and then we can have others take this. how is India different for you? How is it unique?
Yeah, it's a bit tough question to the organization like JETRO specifying the difference. And I rather would like to listen to other panelists for their opinion. But yeah, there must be lots of advantages or difference of India which can be discussed. But very honestly, biggest challenge for JETRO is that how we can support those Japanese companies to structure their global network for new innovative business. And my biggest homework now is how I can differentiate these destinations, different destinations, and I have to combine them, not only bilateral way, and propose to those Japanese business for their consideration. Maybe extreme cases, Japanese corporate work together with Indian startup or even a conglomerate, also with African startup to explore US market, say, something like that idea. I'm thinking to work more with my colleagues in Singapore for now, more, how can I say, regional kind of a collaboration for this innovative business. And I know the company like Panasonic is already working in such a global way. But we also have many Japanese SMEs in Japan, which have a will to more global business. So we'd like to show the clear picture using our global hub network. And we know such case can be achieved one by one, not in a big way. But still, India must be the key country and should be centered among global network. This is my comment.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Manish, so coming from with the background of like 120 years of innovation, right, and now having a really global diversified portfolio of products and markets, how is India unique? How is India different? Or do you see India, I know you mentioned a few things in terms of access to innovation, talent, and so on. What is really unique about India for you, and as opposed to being just an alternative to other centers, other ecosystems?
Right. I think that's a very, very good question, Amaresh, that you asked. So before I touch upon that, let me kind of give a little bit holistic view of Indian startup ecosystem, so to say, and then kind of plug it back to why Panasonic kind of looks at it differently, especially in Indian context. I mean, if you see the startup ecosystem started back in 2012, 2013 timeframe, and since then we have seen roughly about 50,000 plus startups coming. Out of that, today we still have 40,000 active startups. India has become number 4 in terms of the entire startup ecosystem hub. If you look at after US, China, and UK, it has surpassed Israel as well in terms of number of unicorns. Unicorns are 35. Last month, Cars 24 also became a unicorn after regulatory back in October last year. Now, if you also look at Indian startup ecosystem, we can divide them into 3 categories. One could be the service/solution /product providers. The second would be aggregators, and third would be deep tech. While what we have seen is over the last 5-6 years, the first category, which is service/solution product providers, that is significantly matured. The second is which is aggregators, has also reached to some level of maturity, but the deep tech is kind of still maturing. And this is one area which we kind of are very interested from a sampling point of view. And there are very few startups who work in the kind of core technology, like as I was telling earlier, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, industrial IoT, all those spaces. So that's where our interest comes. And we kind of scope for those kind of startups who are kind of experimenting in this area. They can become a kind of test bed for us to try out our technology, we try out their technology. So it's a kind of hand in glove kind of thing, and we kind of discuss some sort of go to market model jointly, and that's how we kind of come across those startups. So from our point of view, while India is kind of some level of maturity it has reached on the first 2 areas, The deep technology, deep tech startups are still kind of evolving over a period of time. But it is promising because the kind of technology companies we work with or startups we work with are some of the things are very, very unique. So that's how we look at that ecosystem very closely from a technology collaboration point of view.
Got it. That's great segmentation, kind of like services slash products, aggregators, and deep tech. I think that's really cool way of looking at it. I'm going to now, since Atit seems to have a lot of data on his fingertips, I thought we'll pull him into this conversation as well. So Atit, when you look at all the data, I mean, can you identify how Indian startup ecosystem is a bit unique? Can you name a few ways this is like unique and different from all the other centers of innovation and startup activity, right? Like Tel Aviv, Israel, Beijing, Shanghai, Berlin, and then of course the Bay Area.
Still, after 12 months of COVID-19, this unmute problem still continues. I'll maybe Amaresh build on what Kawamoto and Manish shared. I think the unique piece for me in India is that combination of talent, which is there. There are a lot of global companies who are building products from India. So many of the times we see on a product, designed in California, manufactured in India, but somewhere in between it is manufactured in China, but somewhere in between it is engineered in India in terms of the whole work. So that is, I think, a very big aspect where almost 1,300 plus global MNCs are building products from India today. The second part is that this is now extending in terms of unicorns also. We were looking at some of the information recently, and close to almost 30 global non-Indian unicorns have their engineering centers in India. And if you combine them, if you combine the Indian unicorns, almost 10% of all the unicorns in the world have offices in India in terms of product development. But more than that, I think what's really interesting is that when you combine that with India's market, because we are such a heterogeneous market, we have people at 1.3 billion. And then you have multiple income segments. You have an income segment which is, first world, you have a second world and a third world income segment. And all of them require certain basic needs. They want better education, they want better healthcare, they want better financial services, they want to, own cars. It's extremely ripe for disruption because you have this latent need and you have a group of people who can solve for it. And when you have, the likes of Global Brains, JETRO, Panasonic, Intel coming together, a lot more things can be possible.
That's great. Thank you so much, Atit. Kawamoto-san, I'm going to ask you the next question. So, COVID-19 was obviously hard on everyone, right, including the Indian startup ecosystem. We heard from Atit earlier that over 40% of the startups were impacted negatively. Some sectors, of course, gained significantly with shift to online. Examples being EdTech, education, healthcare, gaming, life sciences. And some Indian startups have obviously seem to have recovered to pre-COVID levels or even gone above, and some are struggling. Travel, hospitality, mobility, automotive. I think we also saw fitness and wellness on the Atit chart. So how are you, as an investor, navigating these uncertain times and identifying new opportunities for growth and diversification? Also, a related question, what are some learnings from the startups that, I mean, we're seeing interesting startups emerge in these times, right? And what are some elements that are enabling these startups to kind of continue to innovate and grow that others can learn from? So, Kawamoto-san, would love to hear your thoughts, and then we'll go to the others.
Okay. So, all right. So, in order to survive this, uncertain situation, so basically we have a couple points to give the advice for the startup side. First one is very simple: cash is king. So, although we have ever seen the bunch of the startup which has grown such as unicorn, but those companies are very, accurately managing the cash flow, and management accounting is very tough. So this is a large time to, segregate it, to figure out the meaningless expense. So although I used to work in oil as a member of Japan, at that moment, what we have realized, we raised up a bunch of the money from the SoftBank side. But if we have raised up the 200 million, we might be free. But if we raise up to only 2 million, but growth expectation is almost equivalent, we will use our brain.
Yeah.
So now perhaps, it might be tough time for the of course, investor side as well as the startup side as well. But what the startup entrepreneur keep in mind that now the right time to create the lean structure, account and management. And secondly, second important thing is user understanding, user comprehension. And throughout the interaction and observation with the users, they need to figure out the changes of the users' behavior. And throughout the COVID-19, because you mentioned the healthcare and the edtech has seen the extreme growth, right? This indicates simply that users have behaved differently than before COVID-19. So unless startup side figure out the differentiation from between and so pre-COVID and post-COVID-19, they cannot give the sharp marketing, sharp promotion, sharp sales, sharp product development. They cannot do that. And thirdly, so especially for the Indian startup ecosystem, as you know, the Jio is trying to create a Reliance Jio network. In such a case, they need to create the sharp strategy. So they need to decide whether they will associate with the Jio, or they will take a distance with Jio, or they try to find out a niche space so that they can avoid happening a friction with Jio. So whether they can draw in their right strategy with considering about the Jio's actions and the GAFA's collaborations, they might not be able to survive. In such a case, drawing the strategies based on their leadership. So the entrepreneur side is take a strong leadership so that they can lead the team members.
Great, thanks so much. Manish, I'd like to turn to you. So how's Panasonic as a large global org navigating these uncertain times, right? And identifying, again, opportunities for growth and diversification and so on.
Yeah, so Amaresh, I think this goes back to what I was mentioning earlier, that back in 2017, India Innovation Center was born, and the whole idea was to create new solutions, which could be out of box also. So one is to look at our kind of existing set of product categories and kind of enhancing those, but look at completely different. So I'll give you a couple of examples for that. So for example, we have launched a solution as in EdTech space. We have launched a solution in healthcare space, which is like, if you look at it from a traditional Panasonic point of view, these are not the areas where Panasonic kind of, has been kind of, navigating. So our idea was to look at not only the Panasonic product portfolio, but also create something which is unique. We have launched our connected home solution, which is called Mirai, which means in Japanese, Mirai means future and Kia means home, which is future home. So these are the things which we have been doing in terms of creating things which are completely out of the box. Now, if you look at the Indian startup ecosystem, though COVID has put some sort of break, but having said that, if you look at last quarter or so, it has started picking up again. And that's where we kind of, started again our journey in terms of, engaging with the startups and kind of, enhancing our solutions, utilizing their technologies, and kind of, doing a lot more things with that. Also, from a technology point of view, I think Satish was talking about earlier, some of the startups or some of the sectors have really picked up during the COVID time. Education was one of them. Healthcare was another one. And when we look at our solution portfolio, I think we had launched a healthcare solution. We had launched an EdTech solution called CareerX and XLA. We had launched our global conferencing system, which is a unified cloud solution, which is kind of similar to what you have like Zoom or anything. So these are the areas where we kind of He started doing something a year back itself. That is something which you would say that, kind of, foresightedness, so to say, that, start putting investments in that area. Panasonic also has, global Panasonic also has a lot of, commitment towards India, and especially India Innovation Center. So the kind of, investment that, Panasonic has done over the last 5 years is somewhere towards 50 crore or so, which is kind of, pretty much obvious. So this is the money that we use to create those solutions, to work with the startups, to enhance their technologies and extend our solutions. So those are the things that we kind of do in this space.
Great points, Manish. So both from you and Kawamoto-san, we heard a few interesting things, right? So even in these times of pandemic, trouble, downturn, I think companies need to be focused on, continue to be focused on customers and growth and innovation, right? It can't be just take costs out of the equation. You also have to have a balanced approach. So with that, Suzuki-san, you have a broad visibility, right? You're almost building a platform for organizations in Japan to engage globally, and also the other way, you're looking at companies from outside, bringing companies and startups and investors from outside to Japan, right? So, a question for you, a different question for you. So, what is required for Japanese corporates and conglomerates to engage more actively with the Indian ecosystem? So, we see big opportunities for Japanese companies in India. We've heard from all of you. We see great interest and intent to participate and engage in India. How do we enable? I mean, are there some elements that are missing on the ground? How can we enable greater participation and engagement on the ground? Because there's a lot of interest, a lot of talk, but I think we're still a bit slow in terms of enabling. Are there some blockers on the ground? What can we do to kind of accelerate this engagement?
Okay. Yeah. Looking back these 6 months, I checked all the news article and corporate announcement about the Japanese companies, their new business launch or expansion in India, and I could count 23 major ones, mostly by existing Japanese companies in India. Some are newcomers to India under this COVID situation. So some Japanese companies have already known India's anti-fragility already, but still need to broaden the new interest from Japan. And I dare to comment that still India is not a major country for Japan. We consider such as digital technologies or innovative business creation within India. This is just a matter of image, I believe, simply. There are lots of opportunities and ways of collaborate with Indian startups, actually. On the other hand, like I said, majority of interest from Japanese business is always India's a huge domestic market. Of course, it is not wrong perception, but the Paytm, Oyo, or Imovi are already very active in Japanese market, and JETRO supported a few Indian startups for their penetration in Japanese market. For example, Niramai or Vaimo, one of them. It must be the key to have more open idea to take advantage of Indian startups, and we can work together with Indian startups in any market in the world. And another aspect is that it's a bit touchy to say this, but geopolitics, this is happening in the world now. Yeah. Mostly US-China thing, made us to consider more diversification of our supply chain. And you can imagine how we can diversify from our biggest neighbor and economic partner, China. And in this context, of course, we rather have to consider India as very important partner with more diversified way, not only existing Japanese business model in India. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that. Kawamoto-san, I'm going to put you on the spot again. As an investor, what is required for you to increase your investment in startups? You heard both Suzuki-san and Manish talk about some growth areas, right, like deep tech and so on. But what would it take you to kind of increase your investments here and your engagement with startups, early stage, especially early stage startups?
So this is an expected question. But first, yeah, as a premise, we are investing in two ways. This is as a premise. We are running the pure investment fund and the corporate venture capital fund. This is as a premise. This is why, yeah, we are purely investing to the Series A startup, but however, we are trying to create a collaboration with our CVC. We are collaborating with Kirin and Mitsui Real Estate and KDDI and Sony Financial. And those companies, we are getting the requirement. They want to digitalize, and they want to accelerate the DX furthermore through manufacturing price or office price or their business development, etc. Which is why, in order to enhance the investment for the Indian startup ecosystem, basically, there's the first things. Increasing the number of the requirements. In such a case, we can bring the, what's called the kind of a souvenir for the Indian startup and the co-investor side as well. Because, the Indian investment ecosystem is very complicated and crowded right now. Every investor willing to invest. In such a case, how we can give a value proposition, very clear value proposition, which is perfectly matched with the expectation and the fulfillment from the investor and the entrepreneurship perspective. So this is the first one. And secondly, we are very, trying to approach to the top tier investors, Chiratae and Afro and Sequoia. Because what happened in India is after a certain company has raised up, the 20 rival company has raised up at the same time. This is just an example. But I mean, very competitiveness. In such a case, even if I'm gonna invest one company, but this company might be defeated throughout the big capital raise up from the Axel or Sequoia. So which is why what is in order to increase the number of the investment, what we are thinking is trying to have a cross relationship and trying to bring our clear value proposition throughout our CVC network.
Well, of course, my immediate reaction was maybe you should increase your check size, like SoftBank. Follow SoftBank's strategy of putting in a lot of money so that your company can outplay others, outplay the Axel and Sequoia companies. But that's a very interesting perspective. Thank you for that. Manish, I'm going to come back to you. So you mentioned quite a few things. So in terms of specifically in terms of blockers and enablers, what are your thoughts on what can you do more to get Japanese companies? And you also mentioned earlier on in the conversation about how you can help startups go to market, right? So specifically, what are the top 3 enablers or blockers that come to your mind in terms of helping startups and growing?
I think one thing I wanted to clarify from the earlier comment was that Panasonic also has kind of invested a lot in India Innovation Center. So it's like I was mentioning 50 crore. It is per year. So over the course of 5 years, it's 250 crore. So Panasonic has realized the importance of kind of having that ecosystem built. If you see most of, as Asika was talking about, most of the global corporations, large enterprises, even most of the global unicorns have their offices in India. Now, if you look at the Delhi NCR region, Bangalore, Mumbai, these are the hubs. And what is amazing is that these are also the hubs for the startups. Like, for example, Bangalore has close to 2,000 startups. NCR has roughly about 1,500. Mumbai has about 1,000. So, and these are very, very active startups. So, from a large enterprise point of view, it is important that once you have the startup sitting next to you, it is important to reach out to them and understand what their offerings are, what their technologies are, and then look at what your offerings are and what your solutions are, and see if there is any supplement or if things complement with each other. That's how I think corporations should start engaging with them. There are a lot of companies who are doing that, at their accelerator or incubator kind of programs. But we, as Panasonic, we always look at technology partners in the startup ecosystem. Because one thing which we have seen is, while unicorns or decacorns have reached to a level where they have understood the market, they have understood the competition. The mid-level or low-level startups like Moonforms, which are is still sitting at $1 million kind of evaluation, they struggle to understand what is the competitive landscape for them, or what are their potential customers, or the outreach to the customer base. And these are the things where large enterprises can fill that gap. So it could be a two-way road, utilizing their technology, complementing their technology with the existing solution, but at the same time giving them the platform for their outreach, to the customer base. And that's how I would kind of put it.
No, that's great. It's a great point. I know we only have a couple of minutes, but you're absolutely right. You made some great points. So India, if you look at the Indian ecosystem, right? I mean, it's a huge market, 1.4 billion population. On the consumer side, a lot of companies have grown from started from here and emerged to be unicorns, right? So just on the basis of serving the India market and India B2C market. But on the B2B side, I think there is need for companies to go global, for them to scale in revenue and value. And that's where I think there is a struggle. So I think some of the numbers we've seen is 95% of the companies kind of flatline less than $10 million in annual revenue because they're still at an early stage and struggling to connect with global customers and markets, right? So I think that's where especially big companies such as Panasonic and then organizations such as JETRO and investors, again, global investors can really step in and help. I think help bring in the maturity and to help founders think through new use cases and also help connect them with new markets, new global markets. With that, I think Atif, any closing remarks from your side? I mean, any closing thoughts on this particular topic?
Amaresh, maybe I'll just add 2-3 quick points to the last question that you raised, right? In terms of the law could potentially be. I think one that Suzuki mentioned is the perception that innovation doesn't happen in India; it happens in Tel Aviv or Silicon Valley. I think as companies dig through data, they would find a lot of points where they would see a very strong India story in terms of that innovation which is there. The second part is one of the things that India can offer a Japanese company is the fact that as a country we have a good track record of taking businesses global in terms of succeeding in African market, Latin America, North America, Europe, and this is something which can be a very good capability for a Japanese company looking to go global with new solutions. The aspirations are very global. We have a track record. And I think the third piece is that I think India needs to be seen not as a low-cost center, which happens many times when companies think of engineering, for example. They start comparing with Vietnam or Southeast Asia, but more like a capability center. So Southeast Asian unicorns build products in India. Right? They don't build products there. Gojek is building from India. Grab is building from India. So I think this needs to be seen as an innovation ecosystem, not just for its market, but as also a launch pad for markets globally. And I think that's where a lot of options and creativity will come in for the corporates to consider India. Something which Manish is driving at IIC, Panasonic IIC, is being creative in terms of leveraging this ecosystem.
Great points, Atif. And I think as you also mentioned earlier, there are 1,300 companies leveraging India for its engineering excellence, right? So, and building and more owning and building full products from India. So it's not just the startups, but it's also the multinationals like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Panasonic, and so on. The list goes on. So with that, I know we are on time. I want to thank the panelists one more time for making time to join us and sharing your interesting perspectives, and I hope all the corporates and company leaders listening in had a chance to kind of take not just learning but also like the interesting lessons on innovation and growth, and even in these challenging times. So with that, thank you once again, and I'll hand it back to Prasanna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amaresh. Thanks, Manish. Thanks, Adit. Thanks, Suzuki-san and Kawamoto-san. Some great insights from the discussion. We have received few questions from the audience, but due to the limit of time, I think we'll be able to address one. So the question is, according to you, what's the best way for Japanese corporate to work with startups?
So Suzuki-san, you want to take that? Maybe. So I guess the question again is, what is the what are one or two things?
Yes. What is the best way for Japanese corporates to work with startups?
Best way. Yeah, it's already discussed. Very easy to say Indian software and Japanese hardware story collaboration. But I just was actually into this recent the JETRO's activity. It was just last month. We organized the B2B meetings in virtual way between Indian companies and Japanese companies on healthcare or medical equipment sectors. And we could organize more than 60 individual B2B meetings, and most of the participants from Japanese companies are small and medium size. So in healthcare sector, actually things are happening, and most of the companies have a very good element for the hardware things. And I much made with those Indian e-commerce platform player or some startup companies. So actually things are happening. Even the Japanese MSMEs are having a collaboration with Indian companies. So it might be one by one, but we are going to support such kind of the behaviors towards more collaboration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks again to all our speakers. Thank you for your time and the insights shared today.